Tonight we drift back to the early 1300s, where the salty air of the Atlantic clings to your hair and the cries of gulls cut across the narrow streets of Tangier. The sun bakes whitewashed walls, fishermen mend their nets with patient fingers. You is born into this layered world of faith, trade, and travel. Ibn Battuta, they'll call you, though right now you're just a squirming bundle in a bustling port where ships come and go, carrying stories more exotic than the spices they unload. You probably won't survive this, let's be honest. Infant mortality is terrifyingly high, but against all odds, you do. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening right now, drop your location and your local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world we're all connecting from. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You grow up in Tangier, a city of contradictions, at once the edge of the Islamic world and also its gateway. Berber farmers drive donkeys through cobbled alleys, while traders shout in Arabic, Berber, and even Italian, hawking olive oil, figs, and rough wool. From the rooftops, you can see the deep blue horizon of the Atlantic. Somewhere beyond that horizon lies Al-Andalus, Spain, still remembered in stories of philosophers and poets, though now mostly under Christian rule. Tangier feels like the kind of place where your childhood games are constantly interrupted by the arrival of another caravan, another caravanserai, another rumor of distant lands. Your family belongs to the class of legal scholars. Your father teaches you the Quran, and your mother keeps the home steady with quiet faith and discipline. You spend your days learning Arabic grammar, Islamic law, and recitation, all under the watchful eye of tutors who believe knowledge is a lifelong passport. There's no Instagram or Lonely Planet guide, but you already hear about Damascus, Baghdad, and Mecca from travelers who stop in Tangier's mosques. These stories swirl inside you like spices in a stew, until they leave a permanent itch. You need to see these places with your own eyes. The world around you, however, is anything but safe. The 14th century is an age of Mongol aftershocks, of plague flickering like an ominous candle on the horizon, and of Christian kingdoms expanding across the Mediterranean. Historians still argue whether Tangier, in your youth, was truly prosperous or already showing cracks from the endless tug-of-war between dynasties. What is certain is that for a boy with big ears and bigger dreams, Tangier is less a cage and more a springboard. You watch the ships. Wooden hulls, their sails patched but sturdy, creak and groan as they haul goods from Genoa, Pisa, or the Canary Islands. Sailors bring gossip about distant rulers, miraculous inventions, and bizarre foods. One even tells you about people in the north who drink fermented fish juice. You try to imagine that, gag quietly, and promise yourself never to go there. Spoiler, you'll probably end up somewhere equally weird. Your education is rigorous. Long afternoons are spent poring over legal cases, memorizing precedents, and debating obscure religious rulings with classmates. You imagine yourself a judge one day, a qadi like your uncles, respected in the marketplace, consulted on matters of inheritance, and maybe wearing robes that swish importantly as you walk. Yet in the back of your mind, the ocean keeps whispering, adventure, pilgrimage, the road. By the time you're in your late teens, your city has already marked you with its restless spirit. You've seen travelers stagger in from the desert with sand still clinging to their eyelashes. You've overheard scholars discussing cities where the mosques glitter with domes of turquoise and gold. You've felt the weight of expectation, study hard, settle down, uphold the family honor, but also the pull of the horizon. And then comes the dream of Hajj. Every Muslim is required, at least once in life, to make the pilgrimage to Mecca if able. You picture the Kaaba, that cube-shaped sanctuary wrapped in black cloth, where millions of footsteps circle in unison, chanting prayers that tie them to Abraham and to the Prophet Muhammad. You imagine yourself there, a speck in the crowd, yet finally whole. The idea grows inside you like a fire. Of course, Leaving isn't simple. You're only 21 when the decision crystallizes. You will go to Mecca. Alone. No caravan signed up yet, no wealthy uncle to sponsor you, no carefully packed travel insurance. Sorry, Expedia hasn't been invented. Just you, a notebook, and faith that the road will unfold. The reality check. People die on this route: robbers, storms, famines, all eager to snuff out the reckless. But you're young enough to believe in miracles, and stubborn enough to chase them. Your parents hesitate. Your mother clutches your hand longer than she ever has before, whispering blessings. Your father tries to hide his worry under a stern reminder: keep your faith, keep your law. You promise both, even though you know once you leave Tangier, nothing will ever be the same. The morning of your departure, the sky is pink with dawn. You sling a modest bag across your shoulder. Inside, a few coins, a set of clothes, and books of law. You don't know it yet, but this bag is comically inadequate. Spoiler, you will someday ride across deserts, sail past India, nearly drown in storms, and end up eating things that do not resemble food. None of that is on your packing list. But right now, you step through Tangier's gates. The city behind you hums with the life you've always known: markets clattering, muezzins calling, neighbors waving. Ahead lies an uncertain ribbon of road winding toward lands you've only heard of in whispers. You take a deep breath, your sandals pressing into the dust, and set out. Your heart pounds not just with fear, but with exhilaration. You're not just a scholar now, you're a pilgrim, a traveler, and soon, a wanderer whose stories will outlive empires. And so the horizon swallows you, one step at a time. You step forward on the dusty track, the morning sun still low enough to cast long, cool shadows. 21 years old, robes a little too crisp for the journey ahead, and sandals that will almost certainly betray you long before Mecca. The first steps away from Tangier are heavy, not just because of the weight of the satchel on your back, but because each footfall seems to echo, no turning back. The air smells faintly of salt from the Atlantic, but the breeze grows drier the farther you go. You're leaving behind the only home you've ever known, trusting that roads, camels, and strangers will carry you across half the known world. The first part of your journey threads you through North Africa. The Maghreb, they call it, the west of the Islamic world, where the Atlas Mountains slice the horizon like the jagged edge of a knife. You pass through villages where goats nibble on whatever counts as vegetation, and you catch the cautious eyes of farmers who wonder if you're just another dreamer destined to collapse halfway to the desert. Travel is dangerous, not just because of bandits but because of thirst. One dry week on the road, and you'll start hallucinating fountains. Spoiler, yes, you will later confuse a mirage for the real thing. Twice. Caravans become your lifeline. You tuck yourself into groups of merchants who, thankfully, see value in having an educated young man along. You can read contracts, settle disputes, and recite verses of the Quran in moments of doubt. In exchange, they share their water, their tents, and occasionally their half-stale dates. It's not glamorous, but it's survival. Historians still argue whether solo travel in this era was as rare as you made it sound in your memoirs, but let's be real, without these caravans, you'd have been vulture food within a week. One evening, under the burnt orange glow of sunset, you share a fire with men who've crossed the Sahara more times than you've crossed your own neighborhood. They tell you about the endless dunes, the way the stars alone keep you on course, and the strange rhythm of camels who can walk for days without complaint. They also tell you about the robbers who spring from nowhere, their swords glinting like lightning. You listen wide-eyed, trying not to look as nervous as you feel. When they laugh, you laugh too, though mostly to avoid choking on fear. It isn't all doom and dust, though. In Tunis, you find yourself dazzled. The city brims with life, spice markets where the air tingles with cinnamon and pepper, scholars debating under arched colonnades, and craftsmen hammering copper so loudly you wonder if your ears will ever stop ringing. The mosques rise like giant lanterns of stone, and the harbor glitters with ships from Sicily, Venice, and Alexandria. You realize that the Islamic world isn't just vast, it's interconnected, a web of cultures that hums with energy. And yet, Tunis isn't without its quirks. One merchant insists on selling you a so-called miracle potion brewed from donkey milk and saffron. He swears it cures everything from headaches to heartbreak. You politely decline, but later, you watch him swindle a sailor who chugs it down and immediately regrets his life choices. You jot this down in your mental notebook. The world is full of both wonders and scams. As you press farther east, the roads grow harder. The land is flatter, the air hotter, and your body aches in ways you didn't know were possible. Your sandals blister your feet until each step feels like a small betrayal. You try not to think about Tangier, but sometimes you dream of your mother's cooking, the tang of olives, the comfort of routine. Still, each sunrise brings new determination. Mecca lies ahead, and you refuse to stop. One day, you fall ill. Fever grips you like a vice, and for a moment, you consider turning back. But in your fever dreams, you see the Kaaba, wrapped in black cloth, glowing like a beacon. You wake drenched in sweat but steadied by faith. A fellow traveler, an old man with more wrinkles than teeth, shares with you a pouch of crushed herbs. He calls it desert tea. It tastes like someone boiled a cactus, but somehow, you recover. Later, you'll wonder if it was the herbs, the prayer, or simply stubbornness that pulled you through. Along the way, you also encounter scholars. In mosques and madrasas, you listen to debates about law and philosophy. Some argue with such intensity you worry they'll come to blows over whether a contract signed under duress is valid. You quietly thank yourself for keeping your mouth shut. These gatherings remind you of your own calling. You're not just wandering aimlessly, you're stitching together pieces of knowledge, one conversation at a time. At night, you lie under the stars. Out here, the sky feels infinite, and constellations stretch across the dome like jeweled rivers. You whisper prayers, sometimes out of gratitude, sometimes out of fear. You wonder if the same stars shine over Tangier, and if your family is looking at them, too. The road is lonely, yes, but it's also strangely liberating. No one here remembers you as the boy from Tangier. You're simply another pilgrim, another pair of tired feet chasing something bigger. You finally approach the edges of Egypt, the land of the Nile, the old bones of pharaohs, and cities that will make even your seasoned caravan companions stop and stare. But before you cross into that fertile kingdom, you pause on a rocky hill and glance back west. The road behind you is a ribbon of dust, stretching all the way to Tangier. You've survived the first stretch, and already, you feel different, worn, tested, but also alive in a way that study halls never managed. You shuffle forward, dust rising around your ankles, and the sun beating so mercilessly you begin to think it has a personal vendetta. The landscapes of North Africa roll out before you like a test designed to expose every weakness. Rocky hills, wide plains where the horizon trembles with heat, and deserts where your tongue sticks to the roof of your mouth like glue. The Maghreb isn't simply a backdrop, it's a trial, a filter to separate the stubborn from the lost. And stubborn, you most certainly are. Caravans remain your lifeline. You fall into rhythm with traders who've long mastered this balancing act of risk and reward. Camels sway like ships at sea, their hooves leaving soft crescents in the sand. The jingling of bells, the creak of saddles, and the occasional shout of "keep up" create a soundtrack you can't escape. A few days in, you realize that camel smells are something no textbook back in Tangier ever warned you about. The stench clings to your robes, your hair, and your soul. Congratulations, you are now officially a traveler. Food along the way is, let's call it basic. Hard bread that could double as a weapon, olives so salty they make you pucker for an hour, and, on lucky days, lentil stew. One merchant swears by camel's milk as a cure for fatigue. You drink it, and while you don't exactly feel cured, you do spend an uncomfortable night reconsidering your life choices. Still, these small misadventures turn into shared laughter around the fire, easing the loneliness of the road. The cities you pass through, however, light sparks in your imagination. Fez, for example, dazzles with its labyrinthine streets and the hum of students at the Qarawiyyin University, already centuries old by the time you arrive. You wander its courtyards, brush past scribes copying manuscripts, and overhear heated debates about astronomy and law. The sheer volume of knowledge makes you feel small but also determined. You want your own mind to carry treasures worth as much as silk or gold. Historians still argue whether you exaggerated some of your descriptions of Fez, but one thing is clear: it left a mark on you. Not every stop is so grand. Some villages are nothing more than clusters of mud brick houses, where goats wander freely and the well is the most prized possession. Yet even here, hospitality shines. Families invite you to share couscous or dates, insisting you eat more even when your stomach protests. In one dusty hamlet, a farmer insists on showing you his prized rooster, which, according to him, has crowed at dawn every day without fail for 15 years. You smile politely, though deep down you suspect the rooster is either immortal or very much a rotating cast of identical replacements. The further east you move, the more you sense the layers of cultures overlapping. Berber tribes, Arab settlers, Andalusian refugees, everyone carries their own traditions, accents, and stories. Around campfires, you hear tales of saints who walked across deserts unharmed, of jinn lurking in wells, and of distant kings whose palaces gleam with marble. Some of it you take as fact, some as myth, but all of it seeps into the narrative you're slowly building in your mind. You also encounter fellow pilgrims. Some are wide-eyed like you, clutching their small bundles of possessions, while others are veterans, already on their second or third Hajj. They tell you how each journey feels different, how the road reshapes your heart no matter how many times you take it. One older woman, with a face carved deep by years of travel, pats your shoulder and says, "The road will teach you more than books ever can." You nod, though privately you wish the road might teach you something less painful than how to walk with blisters. Danger never lingers too far. Once, near a narrow pass, your caravan is startled by the sudden appearance of riders, bandits, swords flashing in the sunlight. For a heartbeat, everything freezes. But instead of attacking, they demand a toll: coins, cloth, a few bags of grain. Your group pays up, grumbling but relieved, and the riders vanish as quickly as they came. That night, you lie awake, replaying the moment, realizing how thin the line is between being a traveler and being a tale of what went wrong. Despite the risks, there are moments of sheer beauty. You crest a hill and see the desert at sunset, dunes glowing red, shadows stretching long, and the sky slowly bleeding into indigo. It looks less like Earth and more like some vast, painted canvas. You whisper a prayer of gratitude, realizing that without the hardship, you might never have reached this kind of awe. By the time you approach the edges of the Egyptian frontier, your body feels worn but your spirit sharper. You've learned how to ration water, how to read stars when paths disappear, and how to tell the difference between a friendly stranger and one you should politely avoid. You've also learned that sandals are a scam, and boots, if you ever find them, are the real treasure. You pause one evening at a caravanserai, listening to the hum of voices in many tongues. Merchants argue about prices, pilgrims compare routes, and children chase each other through the courtyard. Someone strums a lute, and the tune floats up into the night sky. You think of Tangier, of your mother's voice, of your father's stern counsel, and of the Kaaba waiting far ahead. The world is already larger than you imagined, and you've barely scratched its surface. Tomorrow, the Nile awaits. Cairo's minarets will pierce the horizon soon, and its streets will test your senses like nothing before. But for now, under the stars, you pull your cloak tighter, close your eyes, and let the road cradle you into uneasy sleep. You wake to the sounds of water lapping, a new soundtrack after weeks of desert winds and camel groans. Egypt, finally. The Nile stretches before you like a silver artery running through the body of the land, its banks green and lush in shocking contrast to the sand you've trudged across for days. You blink, rub your eyes, and for a moment think you're hallucinating. After all, how could such fertile abundance coexist with the barren wasteland you just crawled through? But it's real. The Nile is real, and so is the hum of life clustered around it. Cairo greets you with overwhelming force. The city isn't just alive, it's electric, buzzing like a hive where every bee is twice as loud as necessary. Minarets pierce the sky, taller than any tower you've ever seen. Markets explode with color, indigo cloths, crimson spices, heaps of shining copper. The smell hits next, a chaotic blend of roasting lamb, donkey droppings, rose water, and incense. Your poor nose never had a chance. You squeeze through alleys where merchants shout over each other, eager to sell you everything from polished daggers to jars of honey that supposedly heal heartbreak. You keep your coins tucked deep in your robe, already suspecting heartbreak is cheaper. And then, there's the people. Cairo is a crossroads of the medieval world. Turks, Persians, Berbers, Nubians, Syrians all brushing shoulders, all bargaining with the same wild intensity. One man, noticing your wide eyes, chuckles and says, "If you can survive Cairo's markets, you can survive the road to Mecca." You nod, pretending confidence, though you're secretly wondering if this place might be more dangerous than bandits. Still, Cairo is dazzling. The city boasts madrasas where scholars argue deep into the night, their lanterns glowing like tiny stars. You attend lectures, scribble notes, and quietly compare Cairo's legal minds with those of Tangier. Egypt's scholars seem both sharper and more theatrical, turning every ruling into a performance. You admire it, though you also wonder if you'll ever measure up. Historians still argue whether Cairo in your time truly rivaled Baghdad as the intellectual capital of the Islamic world, but standing there, you're convinced it does. Of course, Egypt carries its ghosts. You join a small group that sails southward, drifting along the Nile in boats that creak as if they've been floating since Moses. Palm trees sway at the edges, and villages appear like mirages, clusters of mud huts where children run barefoot to wave at you. And then, in the distance, you glimpse ancient ruins. Temples older than memory, their walls carved with strange figures, hawk-headed gods, queens towering in stone, hieroglyphs that no one around you fully understands anymore. You lean closer, squinting at the faded colors, and wonder what stories are trapped in those walls. The locals tell you some are cursed, that anyone who lingers too long will lose their mind. You don't test that theory, though later, you'll half regret not sneaking a closer look. The pyramids, though they're impossible to ignore. You finally see them, rising from the desert like mountains made by human hands. Their sheer size makes your stomach drop. Even though centuries have weathered their edges, they still tower over everything else, daring you to guess how they were built. You walk around their bases, dizzy with wonder. Some say demons must have lifted the stones, others whisper it was sorcery, and still others insist it was sheer human determination. Historians still argue whether medieval travelers like you truly grasped the pyramid's antiquity, but the awe you feel is beyond debate. You reach out and touch the cool stone, grounding yourself in the weight of time. Egypt also reveals its quirks. One scribe you meet insists on keeping a pet monkey in the madrasa courtyard, claiming it's the best study companion because it never interrupts debates. You watch the monkey tear pages from a book and decide to keep that observation to yourself. Later, a local healer offers you a sun protection paste made from, of all things, crocodile dung. You decline with exaggerated politeness, but the mental image will follow you forever. Remember this, it'll come up later when your skin is peeling under some other merciless sun. Despite the marvels, danger simmers under the surface. News trickles in of uprisings, famine in some provinces, and tax collectors growing harsher. The Mamluk rulers keep tight control, but you sense Cairo is always one bad harvest away from chaos. For now, though, the city thrives, and you tuck your observations away, determined to write about Egypt's grandeur one day. One evening, you climb to a rooftop overlooking the Nile. Lanterns flicker below, boats drift like fireflies on the water, and the call to prayer ripples through the air from dozens of minarets at once. You breathe it in, a mix of serenity and noise, sacredness and chaos. This, you realize, is the world you came to see, the world that keeps expanding the more you step into it. And yet, the horizon still beckons. Mecca lies further east, waiting. Cairo has been a marvel, but it's also a reminder. Every stop is only a chapter. Tomorrow, you'll join another caravan, one bound for the Red Sea, where the desert waits again, and beyond it, the holy city. For now, though, you let the hum of Cairo lull you. You've survived deserts, you've touched the pyramids, and you've sipped Nile water that glitters under the moonlight. You lie back on the rooftop tiles, the stars flickering above you, and think, if the road so far has already held this much wonder, what could possibly come next? The desert stretches out again, but this time your stride feels lighter, steadier, as though Cairo's energy has seeped into your bones. The caravan you've joined is larger than any before, a vast procession of camels, mules, and humans strung out across the sand like beads on a thread. You're heading south and east toward the Red Sea, where the route bends toward the Hijaz, the land of Mecca. Every step feels charged now, every mile humming with anticipation. You're not just wandering anymore, you're closing in on the heart of your faith. The heat presses down like a hammer, and sand gets into places you didn't know existed. You learn quickly that desert travel is a kind of spiritual test. Silence stretches so wide you can hear your own heartbeat, while mirages shimmer ahead, tricking you into chasing water that never appears. One day, your caravan nearly panics when a sandstorm rolls in, a wall of dust blotting out the horizon. You clutch your robe over your face, stumble blindly, and pray with every step. Hours later, when the storm finally breaks, you emerge covered head to toe in grit, looking more like a baked loaf than a pilgrim. The veterans laugh, telling you it's your initiation. You laugh, too, though mostly to keep from crying. But then, you crest a hill, and there it is, the sight you've been chasing since Tangier. Mecca. A city tucked between stark mountains, its heart pulsing with the Kaaba, wrapped in black cloth and glimmering in the desert sun. Your breath catches. For years, you've heard stories, memorized verses, imagined this moment, but none of it compares to seeing it with your own eyes. You join the tide of pilgrims streaming toward the sanctuary, the air thick with chants, prayers, and tears. The rituals of the Hajj consume you. You circle the Kaaba, pressed shoulder to shoulder with men and women from every corner of the world. The air is heavy with sweat, dust, and devotion. You run between the hills of Safa and Marwa, retracing the steps of Hagar searching for water for her son. Your legs ache, but the symbolism carries you forward. You stand on the plain of Arafat, the sun scorching your neck as you raise your hands in supplication, joining thousands in a chorus of pleas that seem to shake the air itself. At Mina, you hurl pebbles at stone pillars, reenacting Abraham's defiance of temptation, and wonder if your throws are strong enough to scare away your own inner doubts. For the first time, you feel part of something vast. Pilgrims around you speak Persian, Turkish, Somali, even Chinese. Some wear fine silks, others simple wool. Some arrive in caravans guarded by soldiers, others barefoot with only a bag of bread. Yet here, distinctions blur. All chant the same prayers, all bow in the same direction. You realize you're woven into a fabric far greater than your own small thread. The scholarly side of you soaks it all in. You meet jurists from Persia who debate points of law with Syrians until dawn, and mystics from Anatolia who whisper about divine love in riddles. You join study circles in Mecca's mosques, scribbling notes while trying not to look overwhelmed. Historians still argue whether you truly met all the figures you later claimed, but in your heart, each encounter feels monumental, each conversation a seed of knowledge to carry forward. And then, there are the quirks. One fellow pilgrim insists on wearing the same pair of sandals throughout the entire Hajj, bragging that they're blessed. By the end, the sandals are held together by sheer stubbornness and a bit of string. Another man insists he can predict the future by the way smoke curls from campfires. You nod politely, though privately you think he's inhaled a bit too much of it. These characters remind you that pilgrimage is as much about the people as the rituals, they're the threads that make the tapestry colorful. Even here, danger hums at the edges. A rumor spreads of robbers ambushing stragglers outside the city. Some pilgrims vanish, their names whispered later in sadness. Others collapse from heat or exhaustion, their bodies carried away quietly so the rhythm of devotion continues. You realize, with a shiver, how fragile life is, how close you came to never standing here at all. But the overwhelming feeling is gratitude. As you press your forehead against the Kaaba's stone, you feel tears slip down your face, uninvited but unstoppable. All the dust, hunger, and fear dissolve into this one moment. You made it. Against every odd, you, the boy from Tangier, are here. You whisper a promise to yourself, not just to return home, but to keep going, to see how far the road might stretch. When the Hajj ends, pilgrims scatter like birds, returning to their lands with stories and souvenirs. Some beg you to travel with them, tempting you with Persia's gardens or Syria's libraries. You hesitate, then smile, your journey doesn't end here. Mecca was your first destination, but not your last. The world feels suddenly open, like a map unrolling at your feet, daring you to step across it. One evening, as the sun dips behind Mecca's mountains, you sit with a small group of new friends. You sip sweet tea, the air cooling, and listen to the chatter of pilgrims packing to leave. Someone asks you, "So, where next?" You look at the stars, twinkling like 1,000 unanswered invitations, and shrug. Wherever the road leads. The road pulls you onward, eastward and northward now, your sandals once again filling with sand as you leave Mecca behind. You've performed your Hajj, fulfilled the duty that first set your feet moving, but instead of pointing back toward Tangier, you veer forward. Why stop when the world feels like it's just unfolding? Persia and Iraq call to you, lands of gardens, poets, and once great capitals where the air still hums with echoes of empires. Your caravan trudges across the Hijaz desert toward Iraq, and soon the landscape shifts. Gone are the harsh, jagged mountains of Mecca, in their place rise gentler plains, scattered with oases where palm trees sway above pools of cool water. Each oasis feels like a miracle after endless dust, and each sip reminds you how thin the line is between thriving and perishing. One afternoon, a fellow traveler jokes that water tastes sweeter than wine when you've nearly died of thirst. You laugh, but it's the kind of laugh tinged with too much truth. Basra greets you with the thick scent of dates and river breezes from the Shat al-Arab. The markets here brim with spices, silks, and curious objects shipped from India and beyond. You wander among the stalls, fingering carved ivory trinkets, watching monkeys on chains dance for crowds, and wondering if half of this chaos is staged just to dazzle pilgrims like you. Merchants here have perfected the art of convincing wide-eyed travelers that everything is rare, priceless, and necessary. You don't have the heart or the coins for most of it, but you tuck away the memory. Then, Baghdad. The very name makes your pulse quicken. You've heard about this city your whole life, once the jewel of the Abbasid Caliphate, where the House of Wisdom overflowed with scholars and the caliphs lived like kings from fairy tales. And now, here you are, approaching its gates, eager to step into history. Except, it isn't quite the Baghdad you dreamed of. The Mongols stormed through in the 13th century, and their destruction still lingers like an open wound. The libraries are gone, the grandeur diminished, the city quieter than you imagined. Yet life clings stubbornly, bazaars hum with trade, scholars still debate in courtyards, and the Tigris still flows, carrying boats piled high with goods. Historians still argue whether Baghdad in your time was truly a ghost of itself or still a thriving hub, but you see both truths at once, splendor dimmed but not extinguished. Still, Baghdad gifts you encounters that linger. You meet a circle of scholars who invite you into their debates about Islamic law, their arguments sharp but respectful, like swords sheathed in silk. One of them quotes Al-Khwarizmi's algebra in casual conversation, and you pretend to follow, though in your mind you're still working out the basics. You soak it up anyway, tucking their insights into your mental backpack of knowledge. In a city that has endured ruin, the endurance of learning feels like a quiet miracle. You press on into Persia, where the world suddenly softens. Gardens blossom behind high walls, fragrant with roses and shaded by fruit trees. The Persians, you realize, have mastered the art of taming harsh landscapes into havens of tranquility. You sip tea beneath latticed pavilions, the air cool with fountains, and wonder if paradise might look something like this. In Shiraz, poets' verses seem to hang in the air itself, as though Hafiz or Sadi has personally sprinkled their stanzas over every courtyard. Travelers trade lines of poetry as easily as they trade gossip, and you find yourself swept into the rhythm. Not everything is tranquil. In one city, you hear rumors of assassins, the fabled remnants of the Nizari sect, who supposedly lurk in mountain fortresses, ready to strike at rulers with daggers dipped in honeyed poison. Whether they still exist or are just the bogeymen of tavern stories, you can't be sure. Still, you sleep a little lighter in those nights, tucking your dagger closer to your side, just in case. Persia also tests your stomach. One host offers you a dish of fermented fish paste that nearly knocks you flat. You smile politely, choke it down, and swear to yourself that you'll never complain about camel's milk again. Later, you discover pomegranate stew so rich it makes you rethink every meal you've ever eaten. Travel, you realize, is equal parts survival and surprise, sometimes delight, sometimes regret. But the greatest surprise is how deeply connected everything feels. In Baghdad, you met scholars who referenced Egyptian jurists. In Persia, you hear merchants quoting tales they picked up from Indian sailors. The Islamic world isn't a patchwork of isolated places, it's a living, breathing network, tied together by faith, trade, and curiosity. You're just one pilgrim moving along its threads, but already you sense that your footsteps are stitching you into its fabric. One evening, you sit in a Persian garden, fireflies blinking around you, the air perfumed with jasmine. You think of Tangier, of Cairo, of Mecca, and now Baghdad and Shiraz. Each place is different, each place its own universe, yet they flow into one another like rivers meeting at the sea. The road has stopped being a line, it's become a web, and you're tangled joyfully in its center. You lean back, listen to the fountains trickle, and smile. The Hajj may have been your beginning, but the world is far larger than you imagined. And you're only just beginning to trace its outline with your wandering feet. East again. Always east. The pull of India tugs at you now, like a half-whispered rumor you can't shake. You've heard about its riches, its scholars, its glittering courts where elephants march with jeweled saddles. Persia's gardens have given you a taste for beauty, but India promises spectacle. And spectacle, let's be honest, is impossible to resist when you're 20-something and convinced the road bends for you. Getting there, though, is another story. You head south toward the Arabian Sea, and soon the rhythm of camels is replaced by the uneasy sway of a ship. You thought desert travel was hard? Welcome to seafaring in the 14th century. The vessel creaks like it's one strong wave away from collapsing, and the salty spray burns your eyes as the horizon lurches unpredictably. You grip the rail, stomach churning, and swear to yourself that if you survive this voyage, you'll never complain about camel stench again. Spoiler: you absolutely will. Storms lash the ship, tossing barrels across the deck and soaking your robes until you feel like a drowned pigeon. The sailors, though, seem unfazed. They climb ropes with ease, shout to each other in dialects you barely catch, and laugh at your wide-eyed terror. One hands you a lump of dried ginger, telling you it wards off seasickness. You chew it, gag at the taste, and then admit, grudgingly, that it works. Travel teaches you humility in strange, spicy ways. Finally, land. The Malabar coast of India rises from the sea, lush and green, a striking contrast to the barren stretches you've left behind. Palm trees sway, parrots flash bright in the branches, and the air is thick with the perfume of cardamom and cinnamon. Even before you dock, smaller boats swarm the ship, their rowers shouting offers in languages that sound like music. Merchants clamber aboard, hawking coconuts, bananas, and strange fruits you've never seen before. You take a cautious bite of one, sour enough to make your eyes water, and decide you prefer dates. Calicut, one of your first stops, buzzes like no place you've seen. Markets spill with pepper, ginger, and textiles so fine you're afraid to touch them. Chinese junks tower in the harbor beside Arab dhows, their sails puffing like swollen cheeks. Traders from Africa, Southeast Asia, and beyond haggle with equal ferocity, their voices rising in a chorus of greed and delight. Here, the world doesn't just meet, it collides, blending into something vibrant and chaotic. Historians still argue whether Calicut in your time truly deserved its reputation as the spice capital, but standing in its streets, you're convinced no city could smell richer. Then, the summons comes. Word of your learning in law and religion spreads, and soon you're invited to Delhi. The Sultan himself, Muhammad bin Tughlaq, is said to seek capable judges, and the idea of serving in a court that rules over millions is too tempting to refuse. You set out north, braving jungles that hum with insects louder than any market and rivers that teem with crocodiles so big you swear they could swallow a camel whole. Whether they actually could is debatable, but you're not volunteering to test the theory. Delhi bursts upon you like a thunderclap. The city is vast, its walls stretching for miles, its gates bristling with guards. Inside, palaces gleam with marble, gardens bloom with fountains, and elephants march through the streets like kings in their own right. The Sultan's court dazzles with riches, gold-inlaid thrones, jeweled goblets, musicians whose melodies float through perfumed halls. You, the boy from Tangier, suddenly find yourself in a world that feels almost unreal. And then, you meet the Sultan. Muhammad bin Tughlaq is a man of contradictions, brilliant yet mercurial, generous yet terrifying. One day, he rewards a poet with a chest of gold, the next, he orders executions with a flick of his hand. Historians still argue whether he was a visionary ruler ahead of his time or simply a tyrant with too many whims, but you see both sides in his shifting moods. When he appoints you as Qadi, a judge, in Delhi, you feel both honored and slightly doomed. Serving in Delhi is like juggling swords while blindfolded. Cases flood your court, inheritance disputes, merchant contracts, and occasionally bizarre petitions like one man insisting his neighbor's goat has cursed his family. You try to apply the law with fairness, but the Sultan's shadow looms over every ruling. One wrong judgment, one slip of the tongue, and you fear your head might roll faster than a dropped melon in the bazaar. But there are rewards, too. Delhi's libraries brim with books from across the Islamic world, its scholars sharp and argumentative. You debate with Sufis about divine love, with philosophers about fate, with jurists about the quirks of contract law. One evening, a mystic tells you, travel is not just across land, it is across the soul. You smile, appreciating the wisdom, though privately you think your soul has had enough of mosquito bites for one lifetime. Life in India is overwhelming, unpredictable, and intoxicating. You've walked deserts, seen pyramids, touched the Kaaba, and now you sit in jeweled halls passing judgment under the gaze of elephants and emperors. The road has not only carried you farther than you dreamed, it's thrust you into the heart of power. And yet, somewhere deep inside, the horizon still whispers. Delhi becomes your home, though home feels like the wrong word for a place that never lets you breathe fully easy. You rise each morning in the Sultan's capital, robes neatly arranged, turban wound tight, and step into the role of Qadi, judge, interpreter of Islamic law, reluctant referee of the city's endless disputes. On the outside, you appear composed, authoritative. Inside, though, you're thinking, please let today be about goats and not politics. Your court fills with all sorts. Merchants quarrel over spices spilled in transport, families squabble about inheritance, and travelers accuse innkeepers of overcharging them for beds that smelled like camel fur. You listen carefully, stroke your beard, and issue rulings that balance law with mercy. Sometimes it works beautifully, two men leave shaking hands, dispute resolved. Other times, let's just say people storm off muttering curses you're glad you don't quite catch. But your job isn't only legal wrangling, it's survival. Sultan Muhammad bin Tughlaq's temper runs like Delhi's monsoon, sudden, torrential, and dangerous. One day he showers courtiers with jewels, the next, he exiles them for imagined slights. You watch him launch grand schemes, like moving his entire capital hundreds of miles on a whim, then abandon them when reality proves less obedient than his dreams. Historians still argue whether he was a genius ahead of his age or a madman doomed by arrogance. You, sitting in his audience chamber, decide the truth is probably both, which is much less comforting than it sounds. And yet, the Sultan respects you, for now. Your knowledge of law, your composure in the face of endless petitions, and perhaps your knack for saying exactly enough but never too much earns his trust. He grants you gifts, robes embroidered with gold, fine horses, even servants. For a boy from Tangier who once trudged across deserts praying for water, it feels absurd, almost laughable. You sometimes wonder if you're playing dress-up in someone else's life. But Delhi itself is a marvel, a city that never sleeps. Streets teem with elephants painted in bright colors, their tusks capped with gleaming brass. Musicians play in gardens where fountains sparkle, their notes mingling with the scent of jasmine. Markets overflow with pepper, saffron, and silks dyed in hues so brilliant they almost hurt your eyes. You wander through the bazaars in awe, though you keep a wary hand on your purse, pickpockets here move faster than falcons. At night, you lie awake under a ceiling fan of carved wood, listening to the hum of the city outside. Sometimes, in the distance, you hear drummers and chanting from Sufi shrines. You're drawn to these mystics, whose devotion burns like a quiet fire. One invites you to his lodge, where disciples whirl in ecstatic dance, spinning until they collapse in blissful exhaustion. You don't join the dance, you're too self-conscious for that, but you watch, moved, and wonder if perhaps there's a truth here that no law book can capture. Still, the glitter of Delhi hides shadows. The Sultan's punishments are harsh, his paranoia suffocating. You watch courtiers vanish overnight, their positions swallowed by silence. You hear whispers of rebellions, crushed mercilessly, blood staining the earth. Once, you're summoned to judge a case clearly tilted by the Sultan's will, and your stomach knots as you pronounce the correct ruling. Survival, you realize, sometimes means swallowing the taste of justice turned sour. Quirky details slip into your memory. Court elephants, for instance, aren't just beasts of burden, they're executioners. Condemned criminals are sometimes trampled beneath their feet, a sight you try not to imagine when you see the elephants lazily spraying themselves with water near the palace pools. Another time, you're told about the Sultan's experiment with introducing copper coins as currency to replace silver. In theory, brilliant. In practice, a disaster. Every household in Delhi suddenly becomes a counterfeit mint. You laugh with merchants about it later, though quietly, never within earshot of the palace. And through it all, you live. You judge, you advise, you walk the fine line between service and peril. Some evenings, you allow yourself to dream of settling here, building a life, perhaps even a family. Delhi is intoxicating, and power has its comforts. But you know yourself too well. The horizon still tugs at your heart, whispering of lands yet unseen. One night, as you sip sweet milk flavored with cardamom, a visiting merchant from the Malabar coast tells you of ships bound for China, of kingdoms in the east where paper passes for money, where porcelain gleams like frozen moonlight. Your eyes widen, and you know. Delhi, for all its splendor, will never be the end of your journey. For now, though, you smile, nod, and go back to your duties. You're the Qadi of Delhi, a wanderer wrapped in silks, a judge dancing in the shadow of a sultan. Adventure can wait, but not forever. When opportunity comes, it rarely knocks politely. For you, it arrives in the form of an order from Sultan Muhammad bin Tughlaq himself: escort one of his daughters to the Mongol court, a royal bride destined to bind distant powers together. On paper, it sounds honorable, prestigious even. In reality, it's a logistical nightmare involving ships, storms, and the kind of near-death escapades that make you wonder if maybe goats and neighbor disputes back in Delhi weren't so bad after all. The caravan begins with pomp. The princess, veiled and radiant, departs in a procession heavy with gifts, jewels, silks, spices, and enough ceremonial finery to dazzle an emperor. You join her entourage, imagining the stories you'll one day tell of standing at the crossroads of empires. But before you can spin poetry about loyalty and grandeur, the Indian Ocean interrupts. The first storm hits with no warning. One moment, the sea is calm, almost glassy. The next, clouds boil overhead, winds howl, and waves rear up like mountains. The ship groans, ropes snap, sailors shout prayers and curses alike. You clutch the railing, robes plastered to your skin, certain this is it, you'll drown with peppercorns in your pockets and no one will remember your name. The princess's vessel disappears into the mist, and you lose track of the entire fleet. By some miracle, you survive. The storm scatters the ships across the sea like a child tossing toys. When calm finally returns, you find yourself stranded with only a fraction of the original entourage. Worse, news reaches you later: the princess's ship was lost. Historians still argue whether she drowned or was captured by pirates, but for you, the grief is immediate and raw. You feel the Sultan's wrath from hundreds of miles away, and you know returning empty-handed might cost you more than reputation. Yet, survival pushes you onward. Shipwrecked along the Malabar coast, you wander south and eventually sail to the island of Ceylon, modern-day Sri Lanka. There, the air is thick with spice and myth. Locals tell you this is where Adam first set foot on earth after being cast from paradise. You climb a sacred peak, now known as Adam's Peak, and from its summit gaze out over endless jungle and sea. The footprint-shaped mark in the rock fascinates you. Some insist it's Adam's, others swear it belongs to the Buddha. You, ever the diplomat, nod wisely and say nothing definitive. Quirks of the island delight you. Fishermen balance on stilts in the surf, their silhouettes striking against the dawn. Monks tend to shrines carved into cliffs, where the scent of incense mingles with salt air. And treasure hunters whisper about lost gems hidden in the jungle, tales you chalk up to wishful thinking until one man actually tries to sell you a sapphire the size of a pigeon's egg. You decline, politely, since you don't have pigeon egg sapphire money, not even with a sultan's old gifts in your baggage. But storms aren't finished with you. Leaving Sri Lanka, another voyage nearly ends your wandering for good. Pirates attack, their sails cutting across the horizon like shark fins. Your ship is plundered, possessions stripped away until you're left with almost nothing. The pirates even take your robes, leaving you embarrassed in ragged garments as you drift toward land. Looking back, you'll joke that travel lightens the soul, mostly because it robs you blind first. Somehow, you stagger back to the mainland. In the coastal city of Calicut, traders recognize you, offer hospitality, and remind you that fortune is a wheel. One day you dine with sultans, the next you're robbed by pirates. You laugh with them, though the laugh carries a weary edge. You've begun to realize the road isn't just a string of marvels, it's also a gauntlet. And you're determined to keep walking, even if it strips you bare. Delhi eventually hears of your failure with the princess. You expect the Sultan's wrath to cut short your story, but in one of his unpredictable moods, he forgives you, or perhaps simply forgets, distracted by yet another grand scheme. Relief washes over you, though not enough to anchor you in his court again. You know better now, one whim of the Sultan could end your life, and the horizon still hums with possibilities. So you prepare to move once more, toward China, that fabled land where silk flows like water and porcelain gleams like moonlight. Storms, pirates, shipwrecks, you've faced them all and lived. Why stop now? China, just the word makes your heart beat faster, imagining cities where walls gleam with lacquer, merchants haggle over tea leaves finer than your finger, and scholars debate the secrets of the universe in ink-black halls. You arrive first in Quanju, a bustling port where the sea smells of salt and spices, and sailors from all over Asia converge like bees to honey. The city is alive, vibrant, dizzying, so much so that you almost stumble over a boy playing with a live turtle in the street, a street performance that doubles as an impromptu "don't touch that, it bites" lesson. The Chinese are unlike anyone you've encountered. Their languages twist and turn in musical patterns, their architecture rises like bamboo forests in stone and tile. Merchants lay out silks, porcelains, and ivory carvings, tempting even the most disciplined traveler. You marvel at the precision of everything, the way coins are stamped, the way bridges curve gracefully over canals, the meticulousness of a scholar copying texts by hand. Historians still argue whether the Grand Canal's construction under the Song dynasty or Ming dynasty improvements was the greater engineering feat, and honestly, standing here, you're too awed to pick a side. Quirky encounters abound. You meet a Daoist monk who insists you balance eggs on end at noon for luck, claiming the practice aligns earthly and celestial energies. Naturally, you try it, one egg stands, the rest topple, prompting laughter from street children who seem delighted by your ineptitude. Later, in a tea house scented with jasmine, a local poet reads verses about dragons and clouds. You can't tell if he's insulting you or complimenting your robes, but you nod politely anyway. Trade networks fascinate you. Goods from India, Arabia, and beyond converge here, carried over sea and land, creating a global tapestry of commerce. Spices mingle with porcelain, silk, and gemstones, exotic birds whistle from cages, and coins clink in ways that make your chest ache with nostalgia for Delhi's courts. You also notice a curious habit. Merchants sometimes carry small charms made of coral or bone to ward off evil, an idea that tickles your imagination. Travel, however, remains perilous. You hear tales of bandits along inland routes and rivers swollen with monsoon rains, stories that echo your own encounters with pirates. One merchant warns you not to trust strangers bearing gifts, explaining that sometimes generosity is merely a clever disguise for theft. You file this away mentally, along with your growing list of never-again moments, stormed ships, lost caravans, and runaway princesses. You also meet Chinese Muslims who welcome you with open arms, connecting your world to theirs in ways that feel comforting. They invite you to mosques, where the call to prayer mingles with incense and the rhythm of ancient chants. You marvel at how Islamic architecture adapts here, with intricate patterns and domes unlike any you've seen before. For a moment, you feel a thread tying your distant homeland to this strange, luminous coast. Quirks turn into small delights. You witness fireworks in celebration, a spectacle of light and sound that makes your teeth ache from grinning. You try mooncakes, dense with sweet bean paste and sometimes nuts, wondering how such tiny pastries can cause such joy. A local child offers you a paper kite, and you spend a morning running across a courtyard, kite aloft, feeling the ridiculous thrill of flight tethered only by string. Yet the horizon calls again. You know the coast isn't the final destination. Tales of Canbalik, the great capital of the Yuan dynasty, reach your ears, a city where the emperor's court sparkles with grandeur, where traders, scholars, and adventurers converge, and where your curiosity burns brightest. China feels like a playground for the senses, but you are no longer a simple visitor. You are a wanderer with purpose, an observer whose journey threads continents together, one peril, one marvel, and one peculiar egg-balancing attempt at a time. Canbalik, modern-day Beijing, rises on the horizon like a vision of opulence and authority, walls stretching wide, gates painted in reds that make your eyes ache with brilliance. The air here carries the scent of roasted grains and horse sweat, mingling with incense drifting from temples tucked between merchant stalls. You trudge through crowded streets, feeling simultaneously dwarfed and exhilarated. For a wanderer who's crossed deserts, rivers, and oceans, this city is another puzzle of scale, human ambition, and noise that hums like a living thing. You are not just a visitor, you are a curiosity. Locals stare at your Maghribi robes and turbaned head, whispering, pointing, sometimes inviting you to sit and taste dumplings stuffed with pork or jujube paste. You politely decline the pork, explain your dietary limits, and marvel at how food can become a bridge between worlds. Historians still argue whether the Yuan dynasty's openness to foreign merchants truly fueled innovation or merely masked systemic inequality, but for now, you're content to navigate the maze of streets with a merchant's keen eye. Your official reason for being here is trade facilitation and diplomatic liaison. You meet envoys, scholars, and court officials, carefully noting each hierarchy and protocol. One scholar offers you a scroll of Confucian maxims, which you read by lantern light and find surprisingly insightful, though you try to mask the amusement that the wisdom often overlaps with Islamic teachings you've long known. A local official shows you how the postal relay system works. Horses change in dizzying efficiency, messages race across vast distances, and you marvel at the ingenuity that parallels, yet differs entirely from, the camel caravans of home. Quirky moments break the formality. You witness a street performer pretending to swallow fire while balancing on stilts, drawing gasps from onlookers. Later, a vendor sells snow that never melts, salt shaped into crystalline cones, which he claims is a delicacy from the mountains. You buy one, bite cautiously, and realize it's salt, sweetly seasoned, oddly addictive. You laugh quietly, thinking of all the strange snacks you've collected along the way, dried scorpions, spiced mangoes, and now Himalayan salt cones masquerading as snow. The city itself is dizzying in its scale. Markets extend for blocks, filled with silks from India, furs from Siberia, and spices from Persia. Carriages jostle with pedestrians, camels share streets with horses, and the clatter of merchants' hammers against coins creates a constant symphony. You learn local customs quickly, bowing at precise angles, addressing officials in measured tones, exchanging gifts with subtle gestures that carry hidden meaning. Misstep and you risk embarrassment, master it, and doors open. Despite its grandeur, Canbalik isn't without danger. Thieves prowl narrow alleys, and outbreaks of illness sweep through districts. One day, while wandering toward the palace, you see a man collapse, likely from exhaustion and fever. The crowd disperses, murmuring superstitions, and you are reminded that even in the most splendid cities, mortality walks beside prosperity. You also glimpse the Yuan court's peculiarities. The emperor, Kublai Khan, is a figure of immense power, often observing audiences from elevated platforms, draped in furs and silk. Courtiers whisper about his taste for elaborate rituals, including banquets where multiple courses arrive simultaneously in a precise dance of timing and presentation. You wonder whether such rituals impress or simply overwhelm the senses, a question historians still debate when analyzing Yuan court culture. Among these rituals, you find moments of human connection. Foreign envoys from distant lands trade stories of home, and you share tales of Delhi, Sri Lanka, and Kwanju. Children run past with kites and drums, reminding you of the simple joys amid the pomp. You even meet a local scholar who has studied the geography of the Islamic world, and you compare notes on rivers, mountains, and deserts, laughing at small miscalculations that make both of you appear slightly foolish. And yet, the horizon tugs again. Kambalik dazzles and intimidates, but your journey is never meant to end in or alone. Letters from India whisper of the Sultan's continued schemes, tales of Morocco hint at familiar lands across the seas, and the call of the open road thrums in your veins. You may be far from Tangier, but every city, every encounter, every storm reminds you that wandering is not just about survival, it is about connecting worlds, learning languages, tasting flavors, and weaving the story of your life across continents, one step at a time. After the dizzying grandeur of Kambalik, your journey turns south, back toward maritime routes where the scent of the ocean promises adventure and unpredictability. You embark on another voyage, this time navigating the South China Sea, a realm of monsoons, hidden reefs, and islands that look like they sprouted overnight from the water. The sea stretches endlessly, and you feel a familiar thrill in the back of your throat, the combination of freedom and terror that has become your constant companion. Waves slap the hull, salt stings your eyes, and gulls dive recklessly as if mocking your precarious balance. Southeast Asia emerges like a watercolor map come alive. You stop in Champa, modern-day Vietnam, where sandstone temples rise in jagged harmony with the coastline. You wander markets brimming with silk, rice, and pottery, noticing that local traders have absorbed techniques from India, China, and the Arab world. It's a blend that makes the city hum with cosmopolitan energy. You watch children playing with miniature boats in canals, their laughter mingling with the scent of sizzling fish, and you feel a pang of envy for their carefree ease. Historians still argue whether Champa's architectural style owes more to indigenous innovation or imported Indian techniques, and standing before the temple towers, you suspect both truths intertwine. Quirky encounters punctuate your wanderings. A street performer juggles coconuts while balancing on a buffalo, eliciting gasps and laughter alike. In another alley, a spice merchant insists that the scent of dried lemongrass wards off evil spirits and the occasional nosy tax collector. You inhale deeply, imagining your nostrils as the front line against mischievous demons and bureaucrats alike. Later, you try fermented fish paste for the first time, grimace, and decide that some flavors, like certain royal audiences, are best endured rather than enjoyed. Trade thrives here. You watch Chinese and Indian merchants haggle with local traders, creating a symphony of negotiation, hands waving, coins clinking, and voices rising and falling like music. You note how commerce shapes culture, how foods, fabrics, and even idioms travel faster than armies. You also meet Muslim merchants who have settled along the coast, sharing news of Cairo, Delhi, and Malacca. Their stories bridge continents, reminding you that the world is simultaneously vast and intimate. Nature, too, asserts itself. Monsoon rains flood rivers, turning streets into canals where children paddle small rafts and fishers navigate with remarkable skill. Storms occasionally lash with thunder that shakes wooden houses, a reminder that the elements remain both teacher and threat. You marvel at the resilience of locals, who construct elaborate bamboo scaffolding to survive seasonal floods, and at the ingenuity of sailors who navigate reefs without maps, relying only on stars and intuition. Yet, danger never sleeps. Pirates roam these waters, their sails cutting across the horizon like shadows. You hear tales of captured ships, stolen cargo, and travelers lost to reefs or mutiny. One night, a distant fire on an island hints at a recent raid. You tighten your cloak, silently thanking whichever god is listening that you've survived so far. And even with peril all around, the sea feels alive with possibility, each wave a question, each island a new story waiting to unfold. You continue to Malacca, a key trading hub, where merchants from India, Arabia, China, and even distant Africa converge. The port smells of cinnamon, coconut, and brine. You trade goods, exchange news, and learn local customs, noticing that Malay sailors have perfected techniques that make even your seasoned eyes widen. Here, life feels like a mosaic of humanity. Every face a story, every stall a chapter, every prayer whispered on the wind a connection to the world beyond. In quiet moments, you reflect on the journey thus far. From Tangier to Delhi, Sri Lanka to Kwanju, and now Southeast Asia, you've crossed deserts, rivers, and oceans, endured storms, pirates, and political whims, and marveled at humanity in its countless forms. You've seen cultures collide, blend, and flourish, and yet your heart continues to yearn for more. Because you are Ibn Battuta, the wanderer, and the road, no matter how treacherous, is your home. India calls again, and you find yourself retracing steps toward the subcontinent, though this time your approach is more strategic, informed by years of wandering and observation. You land at Calicut, a port alive with the aroma of black pepper and cardamom, a city where merchants from Arabia, China, and Africa converge like ants on spilled sugar. The streets teem with traders, porters, and sailors, each one moving with a rhythm that somehow organizes chaos into commerce. You trudge past stalls piled high with spices, silk, and rare woods, and can't help but marvel at the variety. Cinnamon from Sri Lanka, ginger from Sumatra, pepper from your current city. Historians still argue whether Calicut's dominance came more from geography or the vision of its rulers, but standing here, you sense both play a role. You reconnect with old acquaintances, Muslim merchants who welcome you as both traveler and storyteller. They urge you to taste local cuisine, dosa filled with lentils, seafood steamed with tamarind, sweet jaggery chunks that melt like caramel in your mouth. You note the fusion of flavors, how regional dishes reflect centuries of trade, conquest, and cultural exchange. One peculiar tip from a local spice trader: rubbing crushed peppercorns behind your ears wards off mosquito bites. You try it, half expecting nothing, half expecting magic, and the mosquitoes seem less interested, or maybe they're just polite. Politics, ever the shadow over trade, makes itself known. The Zamorin, the local ruler, oversees commerce with a sharp eye, demanding tribute from ships and traders. You navigate this carefully, offering deference without appearing weak, listening to court gossip while masking amusement at the petty rivalries that mirror those back home in Morocco or Delhi. Diplomacy feels like a dance, where one wrong step could result in insult, confiscation, or worse. The subtlety fascinates you, and you marvel at how power wears itself in clothes, words, and protocol rather than just swords. Yet, travel is rarely predictable. You hear tales of storms in the Arabian Sea, pirates operating in networks that span from Gujarat to Malacca, and rival merchants who employ cunning tricks. Once, a shipment of your goods is delayed due to a local feud, frustration simmers, but you learn patience, a skill as vital as map reading. You also witness religious diversity firsthand: Hindu temples with elaborately carved pillars, mosques bustling with prayer, and Christian traders arriving from distant ports, all coexisting in uneasy harmony. Quirky, smaller moments punctuate the grandeur. A monkey snatches your hat while you haggle for pepper, forcing a chase across crowded streets. You meet a storyteller who claims he can divine the future by examining the flight patterns of pigeons, and though you are skeptical, you listen and smile, realizing that folklore often carries truths disguised as whimsy. Night markets bring lanterns that glow like captured fireflies, and the aroma of roasting cashews and coconut fills the humid air, reminding you why the world's chaos can also feel cozy. From Calicut, you journey inland, visiting temples, mosques, and cities where the architecture tells stories of conquest, devotion, and artistry. You marvel at the contrast between stone fortresses and intricately carved palaces, noting the innovations in irrigation and urban planning. Scholars debate whether the spread of Islam here fundamentally altered trade patterns or merely integrated into existing structures. Standing beside a grand mosque built atop an ancient Hindu site, you see evidence of both. By now, India is less foreign and more a second home. You know its rhythms, understand the navigational challenges of its rivers, and even anticipate the customs of local courts. You reflect on your growth, from the wide-eyed arrival in Delhi to this nuanced understanding of subcontinental dynamics, where commerce, culture, and politics intertwine. And yet, you are restless. The horizon has taught you one truth that remains constant: curiosity never sleeps, and a wanderer's feet will always itch to follow the next path, even when that path leads back to familiar soil. After years of zigzagging across continents, you finally set sail across the Arabian Sea toward the familiar sands of Morocco, yet the journey is anything but homecoming. You feel the tug of anticipation, tempered by the rhythm of the waves and the unpredictability of monsoon winds. Salt stings your eyes, the deck creaks beneath your feet, and gulls hover as if judging your navigation skills. This leg of the journey is both reflective and practical. You carry goods, letters, and news, but you also carry memories, stories, and a strange ache that only wanderers understand. The voyage brings reminders of your previous travels. Storms rage, lightning illuminates unfamiliar islands, and you recall times when you clutched the mast and muttered prayers in every language you knew. You think of the riverboat in Mali, the deserts of Arabia, and the floating markets of China. The memories wash over you with the same relentless rhythm as the sea. Scholars still debate how Ibn Battuta navigated such vast distances without modern instruments, and as you squint at the horizon, you wonder if intuition was your greatest compass. Landing in Tangier feels almost surreal. The air smells of citrus, seaweed, and bustling port life. Children play along the docks, and you notice older merchants carrying on as though you had never left. Familiar faces greet you, yet you are no longer the same person who departed decades ago. You recount stories of distant lands, spices, and courts, weaving vivid descriptions that leave listeners awestruck, skeptical, and occasionally suspicious. Quirky moments abound. A merchant insists that your travels have angered local spirits, while a child demands a detailed map of all the places you almost drowned. You smile, realizing that wonder, humor, and disbelief always travel well together. You also return to scholarship. You consult local judges, scholars, and Sufi teachers, discussing jurisprudence, astronomy, and theology. You compare the systems you've seen in India, Mali, and China to those at home, noting similarities and differences. These conversations feel like puzzles, teasing your intellect and refining your understanding. Historians still argue whether your judgments in these courts reflect personal philosophy or strict adherence to Sharia law, but the debates themselves affirm the richness of your experiences. Even as Morocco feels like home, wanderlust persists. Tales of West Africa, the Maldives, and the Far East replay in your mind, reminding you that the world remains vast. You chronicle your journeys meticulously, hoping to preserve them for posterity. You remember your youthful eagerness, the risks you took, and the people you met, the merchants, officials, scholars, and ordinary folk who shaped your understanding of humanity. Quirky souvenirs, like a miniature camel carved in Chinese jade or a spice that smells faintly of cinnamon and ocean brine, now fill your study, silent witnesses to your odyssey. In these final travels, you reflect on the patterns of human nature, the universality of curiosity, the persistence of greed and generosity, and the unchanging desire to connect across cultures. Even distant lands seem to echo Morocco's marketplaces, India's courts, and China's temples, revealing a shared humanity that surprises and comforts simultaneously. The wanderer within you begins to feel at peace, not because the world has shrunk, but because understanding, connection, and memory form a kind of home that no single place can contain. By the time you pause, Morocco is no longer merely a port, it is a mosaic of your life's experiences, a canvas of your wanderings, and a testament to a world explored through courage, curiosity, and sheer persistence. And though the horizon will always call, you recognize the profound beauty in returning, sharing, and quietly reflecting. Time flows differently now, slower and gentler, as you settle into the final chapters of your life. You no longer rush from port to palace, from desert to temple. Instead, you walk with a quiet awareness of the years behind you. Morocco's Medinas, once bustling with curiosity and commerce, now feel like a comforting embrace, echoing with the whispers of your travels. You stroll through markets, familiar scents of saffron, cumin, and fresh bread blending with memories of distant lands. You realize that the world you once crossed in months now exists inside your mind as a living atlas of people, customs, and stories. You dedicate yourself to writing and sharing. Scholars and scribes gather to hear your tales, stories of Mali's gold-laden rivers, Delhi's opulent courts, the vast steppes of Central Asia, the bustling ports of the Indian Ocean, and the remote villages where you learned the hum of daily life. Children lean on doorsteps, wide-eyed, as you recount your adventures. Merchants pause mid-trade to catch a detail or a dramatic flourish. Your narrative becomes both entertainment and lesson, blending fact with nuance, curiosity with caution. Historians still argue whether your accounts reflect exact memory or selective embellishment, yet the stories resonate across generations, bridging continents in a shared human experience. Every day, mundane routines coexist with extraordinary recollections. You observe Moroccan artisans shaping clay and metal, fishermen hauling nets from the Atlantic, and scholars debating theology in shadowed courtyards. Quirky encounters persist. A neighbor swears your stories anger spirits, insisting you leave offerings of dates and figs. An old friend teases that you probably carried half of Africa in your pockets. You chuckle, realizing that humor, like memory, binds the ordinary and the extraordinary. You reflect on the vastness of your wanderings. Oceans crossed, deserts endured, courts navigated, and cultures absorbed, all culminating in a deep understanding of both the world and yourself. You notice patterns, generosity, hospitality, rivalry, curiosity, and resilience, the traits that link humanity from Tangier to Timbuktu, Kwanju to Malacca. You remember risks narrowly avoided, storms weathered, and friendships forged in the unlikeliest of circumstances. Even the smallest details, the crocodile dung sunscreen, the monkey stealing a hat, the pigeon diviner, reappear in your mind as vivid markers of a life fully lived. Despite your age, the wanderer's heart beats within. You may no longer traverse continents physically, but your spirit moves freely through stories and memories. You teach, you advise, and you marvel at the curiosity in others, realizing that travel is as much about seeing and understanding as it is about distance. The horizon may no longer be a destination, but it remains a symbol of wonder, calling others forward while you quietly observe and narrate. Evenings are long, and the Moroccan sky unfolds in slow colors: rose, amber, and indigo. You sit, perhaps on a terrace overlooking the city, listening to the distant call to prayer and the soft laughter of children playing. The scent of spices drifts up from the market below. You breathe, letting the memories cascade, knowing that each journey, every mile and encounter, has shaped not just who you are, but how the world remembers you. And with that, you feel a gentle satisfaction, a quiet pride, and a peaceful alignment with a life fully, fearlessly lived. The day wanes, and you feel the gentle pull of evening settling over Morocco. The streets grow quieter, lanterns flicker to life, and the call to prayer hums softly across the rooftops, blending with the distant murmur of the ocean. You let yourself sink into this rhythm, the pulse of city and sea echoing the cadence of your own breath. Every corner of your memory unfolds slowly now, markets of Calicut, the deserts of Arabia, the golden rivers of Mali, temples and mosques alive with devotion, and courts bustling with intrigue. They are no longer distant adventures. They are threads woven into the fabric of your being. Your body rests, though your mind drifts with gentle curiosity. You picture the spices, silks, and carved treasures that once accompanied you, the faces of friends and strangers alike, and the quiet moments of observation that revealed the humanity beneath grandeur and ritual. You hear the laughter of children again, recall the mischievous monkey stealing your hat, and smile at the pigeon diviner who once claimed insight into your future. These memories are neither urgent nor fleeting. They exist as soft, luminous echoes, carrying warmth and the subtle joy of a life fully explored. As night deepens, you let go of the need to chart every horizon or chase every port. The wanderer within has found a resting place, not in one city or coast, but in the quiet reflection of decades lived with courage and curiosity. You breathe slowly, allowing your imagination to drift over the lands you've traversed, imagining the sun rising over deserts and rivers you once crossed, the scent of unfamiliar spices, the hum of marketplaces, the laughter, the stories, and the shared meals that bound strangers into fleeting families. There is comfort in knowing that the journey continues in those who hear your story, in the scholars who debate your legacy, in the children who dream of distant lands, and in every quiet observer who sees the world a little differently because of your wanderings. The stars appear, one by one, distant points of light guiding travelers still, as they guided you. You feel the gentle satisfaction of a life spent moving, learning, connecting, and observing. And now, you let the calm sink deeper, imagining the soft rustle of palm fronds, the whisper of waves against distant shores, the gentle murmur of city life at night. You rest, and in that rest, the vast world you've known and loved folds around you, soothing, infinite, and profoundly complete.